Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Baker Tilly Life Sciences Industry Forecast for 2024 and beyond. My name is Darren Jones. I'm a partner with Baker Tilly. I have the privilege of leading our life sciences industry team and look forward to sharing today a number of insights that our team has been cultivating over the past couple of months as we closed out 2023 and put in place together with our clients many plans for the new year. As we think about kind of how 2023 closed out, I think it's interesting in that the industry has continued to prove its resiliency. There was a time when the life science industry would not necessarily be the bastion of stability across all of the global industries, but truly coming out of the pandemic, our industry has continued to show its strength as well as the resiliency that investors as well as other stakeholders like our patients, like our physician partners and the healthcare system at large is looking for. As we think about what 2024 is going to present to us, obviously today we sit with an uncertain economic condition. Are we in a recession? Are we not in a recession? I think only time will tell. The economists will tell us, but as many of us know, the economists won't tell us until we are already, well into the throes of it. I think many in the industry have already started to feel the effects, of what could be a recession or at least an economic slowdown. What impact that has, I think, is going to be really interesting. And I'm looking forward to this conversation and getting into some aspects of that. I think some of the other key points you're going to hear in today's session include the impacts of the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States. What impact is that going to have on our industry? Is there going to be a potential expansion, of the basket of products, subject to some of the more stringent controls under the IRA? I think there's a lot of perhaps, innuendo, built into how the Inflation Reduction Act has been implemented. And certainly, I think, presents what in reality, I think, a strong pressure on us in the industry, to really understand our pricing strategy, and how that pricing strategy is being perceived. And we'll hear a lot more detail on that, but certainly that's one of the areas I've got a lot of concern around. But that being said, I think there's a lot of positive forces that are helping to propel our industry here in the new year. At a macro level across the industry, we continue to benefit from a collectively very strong balance sheet. Mike Green is going to talk a little bit about this as we talk about, the M&A environment in life sciences. I think we continue to show our true mettle on our innovation. And now with the advent of artificial intelligence and even the use of some generative AI within the industry, continuing to see, how that may help to accelerate, research and development programs as we push into the future. As we think about our overall strategy, the patient centricity of our strategy, we've been talking about that, I think in each of our forecasts over the previous years, but we continue to see how that is playing out within our client strategies, and it's having a profound effect on our ability to reach difficult to contact markets, helping to size and identify patients in some of these difficult to find, difficult to diagnose, difficult to treat, rare diseases. On the flip side, I think while we've been talking about this movement away from primary care and towards, more specialty and small molecule markets, of course, now we're dealing with this explosion in the obesity market, which perhaps is one of, not perhaps, but it is, sort of a traditional primary care market. So are we also seeing a resurgence, in primary care therapies? And all of the implications that has as we take a patient-centric view towards a primary care market like obesity. All that, with that aside, we also are addressing, besides what I talked about with the IRA and a potential economic recession, there are definitely headwinds that we continue to navigate as an industry. There's always, constant, compliance and regulatory pressure. 2024 is going to be a very busy year from a geopolitical environment point of view. Obviously, here in the United States, we have presidential elections. There's also major general elections coming up in the United Kingdom, both of which have the potential to really alter, what this industry is going to be facing from government scrutiny in the coming years. We talked about that impact of pricing pressure, right? That is going to be profound. That is going to be global. If we see price restrictions or more price, scrutiny in the United States, what is that going to impact in terms of operating margin, the outsized margins that industry achieves from the U.S. if those margins are eroded? What is the broader macro level impact of that reduction in working capital? ESG is going to be an area of focus, and we're going to talk a little bit today, on all of the various aspects of ESG. So with that in mind, as we look towards the agenda for today's program, we're going to have a conversation on capital markets. Looking forward to my colleague Mike Green, sharing his insights there as we think about the market access, the global market access environment. My colleague David Gregory can share insights and perspectives there, along with a conversation around the IRA and overall what the U.S. government pricing environment looks like. Jeff Clayton, Tim Nugent are going to guide us through that conversation. As I mentioned before, this view of patient centricity and how that is continuing to evolve, the role of medical affairs, and medical affairs really becoming, that front line for many pharmaceutical and medical device companies. Grace Macalino is going to guide us through a conversation on how we're seeing that medical affairs strategy evolve. I think as we've talked about the global perspectives, we wanted to make sure that we brought in some key global perspectives from both the European market as well as the Asia Pacific market. So Arun Parakat and Mario Prohaski will guide us through that conversation. And then, last but certainly not least, and probably one of the areas where we always get the most questions in these forecast events is around the global compliance landscape. I'm happy to have, my partner Mark Scallon as well as Samantha Sutherland here to help answer questions and help guide us through, what we're seeing in this compliance landscape. And there's a lot going on. So really looking forward to hearing their session. Hopefully we'll have time to close it out with some Q&A. So, as you have questions, please, go ahead and share them in the app. You can go and submit your questions. We will queue them up, and hopefully, time permitting, we'll be able to address those at the end of the program. Thank you very much, and we're looking forward to it. And with that, I will turn it over to Mike Green to get us started.
Thanks, Darren. Let's talk a little bit about what's happened in 2023 as it relates to the capital markets. I think we'd all agree that 2023 wasn't the best year for life science companies raising capital. We had hoped at this time last year that we would see a turnaround in the market in the second half of 24. It hasn't happened. Essentially, 2023 looked a lot like the end of 2022. We have higher interest rates, increasing inflation, some geopolitical crises around the world, and all of those things have dampened investor confidence, which has created some issues in the market. As far as IPOs go, IPOs are way down in 2023 rather, for life science companies. We're seeing only those really high quality companies get out into the market. And those companies that are getting out into the market, the valuations are a lot lower than we've seen in 2022 and pre-pandemic years. As it relates to the venture capital market, the dichotomy here is we're seeing the venture capital funds raising capital, maybe not at record levels, but still continuing to raise capital. Unfortunately, the deployment of that capital is way below 50% of pre-pandemic levels. Those VCs are saving their cash for the best of their portfolio companies and also taking advantage of increased interest rates for their cash reserves. So while 2023 hasn't turned out the way we wanted it, we do have hope in 2024. Most of the big investment bankers, Goldman Sachs, for example, are predicting that interest rates will start to fall, that inflation will come under control, even though it's an election year. And as we know, election years in the U.S. tend to stir the market a little bit. But we're hoping that in the second half of 2024, we'll start to see a resurgence in the capital markets, in particular the IPO market, and that will be a good thing. Now, those life science companies that have cash, they're really trying to find ways to stretch that cash for the next 12 months. But the companies that have cash reserves, in particular the larger pharma companies, are really upping the M&A activity. And while we're seeing the value of those M&A activities significantly increase over prior years, the actual number of deals is flat to down. But we are seeing those valuations at much higher levels, and I'm not going to go through, but we know over the last 12 to 18 months, we've seen some pretty significant pharma acquisitions. MedTech device, not so strong, but we do think that in 2024, as the markets start to turn, we'll continue to see activity in those areas. So, let me just wrap up in 2024. What are we going to see? Well, we do think that interest rates will start to level off or fall. And in fact, here at the end of 23, we're starting to see signals from the Fed that the interest rates will come down in 2024. That should bode well for both inflation. The uncertainty is what we see going on in what I'll call the geopolitical climate. Obviously, there's some significant unrest in certain parts of the world, and we don't know what's going to happen there, and that will have an impact on global markets. But as we sit here today, I think we can say that we are starting to see the turn, and that will impact life science companies. It will impact the markets. There's lots of cash and lots of investors sitting on the sidelines. So once it starts to turn, I think we'll see the floodgates open, so to speak. That being said, the life science development cycle is long, and life science companies are used to riding out these ups and downs in the markets. We've seen some pretty creative types of financings over the last 12 to 18 months. As you all know, a year or so ago, SPACs came to the forefront. This last year, we're seeing a resurgence in safes. So we're confident that life science companies will find a way to find capital. It may be more expensive than those pre-pandemic levels, but we're hoping that the global economy, the interest rates, and inflation will start to cool, and that'll allow companies to have an easier access to capital. Not a great picture, but we're confident and hopeful that at this time next year, we'll be singing a different tune. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to David Gregory, and David's going to talk about market access. Take it away, David.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mike. We can always count on you for some great insights into the capital markets. And now we're going to switch gears a bit to market access outlook for 2024 and beyond. I'm David Gregory. I'm a principal and market access leader for the Baker Tilly Healthcare Consulting Group. And we're going to talk about some of the key trends in 2024 and beyond as it relates to market access, which is very simply put, getting your innovation into the marketplace successfully so that patients can benefit from it, providers can enjoy it, and payers can pay for it. And that's as simple as it is to make your business plan succeed as much as it possibly can. And market access is obviously a key lever in that regard. So let me first start with evidence. As I indicated off the top, real world data, which is what RWD is a very important lever to pull with regard to market access. And we've got 4 different ways that it can be used on this slide, utilizing RWD as a clinical evidence lever, using RWD to drive 510K submissions, using it for PMA approval, and then some use cases around administrative claims data, right? So real world data translates into real world evidence, right? So RWD and RWE are the 2 acronyms that I'm going to use several times here. But let me give you a couple of examples. So with regard to the first one around clinical evidence, Intuitive Surgical and their Da Vinci robot definitely leverage real world data for some clinical evidence very, very successfully. On the 510K submission front, Stryker, there's examples of Stryker in their neurovascular area that used RWD to drive 510K submission. On the PMA approval side, Medtronic has leveraged RWD to secure PMA approvals. And then there are use cases around administrative claims data. I won't say they're plentiful, but they're certainly not rare. And companies like Edwards and Boston Scientific have done a very nice job of using administrative claims data to their benefit with regard to various market access initiatives, for sure. So just wanted to kind of start the talk with some examples of companies that are using this type of evidence to drive strategy, to drive regulatory approval, to drive market access in its purest forms. In terms of other evidence generation needs and considerations, wanted to just share all of these rubrics around the types of studies that can be generated from this kind of evidence, whether it be real world or some sort of prospective evidence. And so you can see at the top of the chart, you have user research studies, lit reviews, retrospective analyses, and the like, which then as you progress down, you start talking about understanding patient engagement and satisfaction, which is really important in this day and age. Hasn't always been that important, but is becoming more and more important. I want to call out on that third tier, the patient journey and assessing compliance and adherence. The patient journey is an extremely important part of evidence generation. In fact, if you stay focused on understanding what the patient's journey is today versus what the patient journey will be with your new innovation involved, if you stay focused on that, that's a good kind of guidelight in terms of your ability to successfully generate some market access for your technology. It's all about what we call clinical utility, which is how are you changing the patient journey? And then also assessing compliance and adherence. Certainly, there are lots of studies. The literature is replete with observations that the majority of us don't follow doctor's orders. For whatever the reason, most of us, and I'm including myself, are not necessarily listening to our doctor and doing everything that we're supposed to maintain and kind of optimize our health. And that's a big part of the drag in terms of the cost in our system. And payers and other stakeholders are very much looking for ways to improve compliance and adherence. And if you've got a value proposition that incorporates these metrics, you are good to go. And you need to kind of leverage that value into some evidence that can show it. And you'll have some success for sure. And then the last thing I'll call out is registry data, RWE studies, EMR studies. I think everybody probably knows that real world evidence can come in many different forms. It can come in claims data. It can come in EMR data, which is electronic medical record data, which is a very rich source of healthcare data, and one that's being leveraged more and more all the time. And going forward, into 24 and beyond is going to be very important for sure. In terms of the types of studies that we're talking about here that can be leveraged and used to generate the evidence that you really want to generate, budget impact modeling. I'm going to call out 2 or 3 here, and budget impact modeling would be the first one that I would call out for sure. Whether it's a provider-facing budget impact model or a payer-facing budget impact model, it's all about basically demonstrating to the payer or the provider kind of what the impact is of your technology on their economics, right? And the payer economics is different from the provider economics. And fundamentally, you need to understand that, and you need to kind of exploit that and use that to your advantage as you go forward with the market access strategy for your technology. Budget impact modeling is extremely important, and getting those models published has become very much a standard these days. So a really important tool to use as you go forward. I will also highlight the fourth one over in the top column, comparative effectiveness analysis. I just want to call out one of the things that is gaining some traction is pragmatic RCTs. So what I think the industry suffered from in terms of research is that RCTs are largely artificial. There's so many rules and protocols around the patient and the provider throughout a randomized clinical trial, that it's almost an artificial environment where the patient's being prompted, every step along the way. So is the provider, and it's not natural, right? And so sometimes the results of those RCTs do not reflect what's going to happen in the real world, right? On the other extreme, you have observational studies that may suffer from complete lack of protocols and rules and guidance for the patient and the providers. But what the industry is saying now is let's meet in the middle. Let's create some pragmatic clinical trial methodologies that can really be meaningful to all the stakeholders. And I'm going to talk about the multiple stakeholders here in a minute. The last study design that I'll mention is in the lower right-hand corner: registries. Registries, if you are not setting up a registry with your technology early on in your development process, you're missing an opportunity. Every time your technology is used, you should be collecting data on how that technology is being performed. And if you don't have a registry in place, you're missing lots of opportunity to collect data. And everybody's going to be asking you for data as you get closer and closer to market launch. And registries are a really important lever to pull in that strategy on a go-forward basis. This slide is let me just call out a couple of things on the patient, payer, and provider impact. As I already indicated, the provider and payer experience, economic experience, and clinical experiences are different for sure. And certainly the patient's experience is a third level of differing experience, if you will. And it's extremely important that real world evidence be used to capture all these different experiences at different levels of the journey, the care journey, and the patient journey, and for sure. And that real world data can be used to kind of a feedback loop back into treatment pathways that can be critical to making adjustments in the way certain patients are handled. And one big thing is subgroup identification, right? It's not about boiling the ocean of your disease category. It's about finding the subgroup within your disease category for which your technology can shine. That's a really important point. Boiling the ocean can sometimes be the Achilles heel of med tech and pharma companies, but finding that subgroup can be really key. The last thing I'll say on this slide is new indications are certainly an important kind of metric or aspect or strategy that RWD can facilitate. So real world data and real world evidence are beautiful ways to leverage the value of a new indication. We all know that the margins on a new indication are a lot better than the margins on your original base indication. And so using real world evidence to get that new indication out into the market sooner rather than later can be an economic boon for you as it relates to that metric for sure. So in terms of the stakeholders, evidence is needed to satisfy a broad range of needs. We always say that don't think that you're going to do 2 or 3 studies and be done with your evidence generation. It's really evidence generation in perpetuity. There really is no stopping generating evidence. And these, 7 stakeholders, and some would add the employer, although I would put them under payers. But these are the large stakeholders that are looking for the evidence that you're looking to generate. And we think it's very important to think about data outings and real world data studies that satisfy more than one of these stakeholders. It is possible for sure. The other thing I want to make sure that I say on this slide is that think of things like, is your technology allowing a diagnosis to be done earlier or to be confirmed earlier? Or is your technology meeting an unmet need? Or is your technology promoting faster recovery? Or is it improving patient compliance, which I already mentioned, right? Those are 3 or 4 value propositions that are the start of the value proposition. I just want to make sure we emphasize that you need to take those starting points and then prove it out with data that if you diagnose something earlier, why? What's the so what? If you diagnose a condition earlier, so what? What comes next? What's the change in the patient journey? What's the difference that payers and providers should stand up and listen to, right? So it's the old so what that you should constantly be challenging yourselves with as you develop evidence strategies for these stakeholders. A couple of trends to note then as we move through the this market access outlook. I'm sure that most of you are well aware of the migration in setting, but look at that bottom survey number. It estimates that $265 billion worth of care, 25% of the total cost of care of Medicare beneficiaries, could shift from traditional facilities to the home by 2025, 26, and the like. That is a huge migration from an institutional setting and into the home environment. There's lots of hospital at home programs that are cropping up all over the country, and technology. In fact, many of your innovations are enabling this shift from the institutional setting of care and into the less restrictive home setting of care. Everybody's market access plan going forward needs to incorporate this shift and understand where is the puck going. Not where is the puck today, but where is the puck going with regard to your disease category and to your innovation. And not only where is it going to be used in 2024 and 25, but where's it going to be used in 2030? You need to be thinking about that now, because this train has left the station, and it's extremely important that you factor it into your market access strategies. Hospital financial distress, I don't need to belabor this one too much. Fitch is projecting deteriorating rating for 24 in terms of hospital financial status. If hospitals are one of your primary customers for your technology or innovation, you need to understand the distress that the hospital industry is in. You need to understand for your particular disease category, how acute is that distress? And you need to have your value proposition kind of address that distress in some way, shape, or fashion. I'm not saying throw in the towel with regard to getting hospitals to pay or to accept additional cost. No way am I saying that. But I think that you just need to have your eyes wide open in terms of the financial distress of the hospital industry. Two last trends. Value-based care. Most of you are probably aware of it. In 2012, it was about 11% of the of market share. Now it's 60% plus in 2020 and beyond. And while downside risk is not significant, I do think the pharma, med tech, biotech industry, life sciences as a whole, needs to get to this table. Payers and providers are talking about shifting risk and value-based care on a regular basis, and the life sciences industry needs to be at that table. So we highly encourage that as you think about your market access plan and strategy, that you layer in the trends that are going on in value-based care. You can see this bubble got bigger over less than a decade. We're not saying it's going to be at 100% in 2030. We don't think that's going to be the case, but we do think that this needs to be a factor in your market access strategy going forward for sure. My last comment or trend is price transparency. Many of you probably know that there is some information out there that prior to 2021 was not available in the public domain. And that is the contracted rates between payers and providers for different services and different procedures, et cetera. You now have the ability, as a life sciences industry, you now have the ability to go find out what major hospitals are being paid for joint replacements, for cardiac surgery, for colonoscopies, for really anything, any service under the sun. You as a life sciences sector do have the ability to go find out those economics now. Those were historically behind an iron door, and now that's fully available. And you need to layer that into your strategy so you understand the economics of your space as holistically as you possibly can. because that can obviously layer very importantly into your pricing strategies and the like. So that concludes the market access outlook. Hopefully we gave you a couple of words of wisdom here in terms of trends moving forward. Good luck with your strategies moving forward. We wish you well. And now I'm going to turn it over to Tim and Jeff to talk about government pricing. Tim, Jeff, take it from here.
And hello, everyone. My name is Jeff Clayton. I'm a principal here at Baker Tilly. I'm with my colleague, Tim Nugent, who's a managing director here at Baker Tilly. And we're excited to talk a bit about U.S. government pricing, some trends and changes coming in 2024. Next slide. So for the last decade, or maybe even more, both political parties really have talked a lot about drug pricing and have discussed a variety of different measures that they might consider taking to reduce spend on drugs. We're at a point now where we actually do have some changes coming that really represent a significant push to reduce drug spend and provide savings to beneficiaries, while also reducing costs to the government on three of their biggest programs. This is going to have the effect of pushing a lot of the liability, the cost, and the risk associated with developing innovative drugs and new technologies to the manufacturers.
So what we'd like to do today, I'm Tim Nugent, I'm Managing Director here at Baker Tilly, is talk about in a little detail what those effects are on the Medicare program, which is the inflationary drug rebate, the negotiation process, and the redesign of their rebates on Part D. Those particular changes, as well as get into some of the Medicaid and 340B changes that we see coming down the pike, which is going to cause a lot of modeling as well as decision-making in 2024. If you can go on to the next slide.
So I'm going to start out here and talk a bit about that inflationary rebate that Tim mentioned in relation to the Medicare program. And this is going to be an inflationary rebate on both Part D and Part B drugs. One of several mechanisms that we're going to discuss today that are being employed by the government in an effort to reduce drug prices and overall drug spend. These types of inflation-based calculations have been something that have been in existence, both the Medicaid program, VA federal supply schedules, for some period of time now, but they're new to the Medicare program. And this could bring major impacts, both for products that are currently on the market and for those that are coming to market in the immediate and farther out into the future. An important thing to understand here with this inflationary rebate calculation is that it really isn't just about changes to WAC or list price. It's really more about pricing and discounting decisions that manufacturers make that would impact AMP calculations. Now, AMP isn't something that has traditionally been a consideration for the Medicare program, but for purposes of this requirement, this inflationary rebate calculation, an AMP-like calculation is now going to be in play. And AMP calculations can really be influenced by a variety of different things. Changes to WAC certainly can influence AMP. However, you could not change your WAC and see changes in your customer mix, your sales strategy, or even really the timing for processing of certain types of transactions like chargebacks and discounts that could lag, could result in an increase to your AMP calculations and therefore cause one of these inflationary rebates to kick in. The industry norm for price increases in the past has been about 8 to 10% on average. Under this program, people are projecting that they would probably need to be more limited to a 3 to 6% range. And I'll just say, if we see inflation to continue to moderate, even 3 to 6% could cause issues in some cases. So as a manufacturer, I think you'd be wise to think deeply about pricing when you're bringing drug to market, but not only that initial market price, or initial WAC, but think about 1 year out, 2 years out, even 5, 6, and 7 years out, and how pricing or changes to pricing that you might anticipate making could impact pricing under the Medicare program. Also really important for manufacturers to have strong controls related to pricing and a solid understanding of the AMP methodology, the various components that go into AMP, how the calculations performed, and how all that aligns to your future discounting decisions, sales strategies, and the like as you interact with your customers. Next slide.
One of the interesting things we're seeing also is the introduction of a negotiation program. Prior to this, the government tried to stay away from setting prices on products in the health and pharmaceutical products or all life science products. Now they've taken a different stance. Now they're asking certain manufacturers to provide them a lot of information, things around R&D, how the drug was discovered, how they're contracting, what their sales volumes are, what they've reported to the government, were they federally funded when they put the drug together. They're going to pull all this information together and then come up with, based upon their review of the data, what's called a maximum fair price. This is important to understand because if you were one of the 10 companies that got selected, and we're going to talk about the selection process soon, you're already going through this. But other companies that aren't selected yet, your turn may come into play. And you need to truly understand what the process is, how it's working, what's going on, the litigation behind it, which we're seeing, as well as understand if I were to come up with an MFP based upon the information I gave to CMS, what might that look like? Also understand that MFP is not going to be private. It's going to be public. So now your customers are going, hey, look, I got a maximum fair price determined by the government. Let's start negotiations there because the government is as well. So really a lot of things to think about because this could have a huge dent into your cost for the product. Next slide, please.
So Tim talked about, the first 10 drugs that are going to be selected. This process is going to continue, though. It doesn't just stop at 10 drugs. The other thing to note with the additional drugs that are going to be selected in out years, this is going to get to a point where they're going to start including both Part D and Part B drugs. So manufacturers, if they haven't done so already, might want to get out ahead of this, start by assessing whether or not their product or products are potentially going to be identified as qualified single source drugs or QSSDs. And then if you do determine that your drug is a potential candidate, you should understand, first off, your product's spend under Part D and Part B as compared to their total spend. And think about how this compares to the current products that have already been selected. After taking that step, if you think that your product or products are possible candidates for this drug negotiation program, you should think about how you're going to prepare for this and be ready for it. And so Tim talked about this a little bit, but first off, there's a lot of data and information that the government's requesting here, ranging from spend information, pricing information, cost information, and the like. It can be difficult to pull some of that information together, particularly when it goes back a long ways in time. So you need to think about how you're going to get at that data and how you're going to present that data in the most advantageous way possible for your company and for the drug or drugs that might be selected for this program. You should also think about preparing for the negotiations process, right? And one way that you can do that is start thinking more about the total value that your drug brings, as opposed to just the price or just the costs associated with it. I mentioned this a little bit before, but also when you think about costs, the government is requesting some very specific cost elements. It's for your company that may or may not really be true total cost if you really think about total cost absorption accounting methodologies. So that's one of the things you could consider is figuring out how to present that capture and present that information in an advantageous manner. The other thing to do, you think about where your MFP might end up. You got to start thinking about how that could impact revenue, the viability of your product or products. And I'll just note they're throwing a little kudos for strong gross to net and government pricing functions. If you have those things in place, you're probably going to be better positioned to be able to assess and respond to these things. Next slide.
We got about a minute or two here left. I want to go over real quick the last part of Medicare, plus some of the changes to Medicaid and 340B that we're seeing coming down the pike. The last piece with the Medicare that's really going to have a significant impact on some of the costs is the redesign of their rebate program. Originally, it was on coverage gap, and you'd pay rebates on portion of the drug when it's in the coverage gap. They're removing that, and they're now making Medicare beneficiaries, instead of paying a percentage of costs, paying a flat dollar amount. That will push additional costs onto the plans and the manufacturer to make up for the drug spend. Now, where the way they're looking at the program is, instead of it being in a coverage gap that you'd reimburse product, that would be all product that's dispensed within the program. And the 10% or 20% would depend upon how much of the drug spend has been spent by the beneficiary. If it's under 2,000, it's 10%. If it's over 2,000, it's 20%. This is, again, something that should be modeled out and looked at extensively, because after 2024, it's going to come into effect. If you can move to the next slide. So let's finish up with just some of the things that we're seeing also on the Medicaid and 340B program. You might not realize it, but both these programs intertwine in the sense that Medicaid's pricing is carried over and used for 340B pricing. So when you look at some of these changes that are on the screen here that are being either actually occurring or proposed, it's going to affect both programs. The one thing to look at is the AMP removal cap. What that is before you were able to, if your AMP calculation came to a certain point and you were actually in a negative, you would stop at a penny pricing. Now they're removing all caps. And basically, if you've come to your calculations, you may wind up having to pay the government to take the product. The last thing here is under their proposed rule, we're seeing that they want to stack pricing for best price. Previously, best price determination was done at the customer level. Now they want to bring in all the costs, and basically the net price that you're experiencing would be the net price that would be used for best price. This has got some ramifications across, not only from the cost of the Medicaid rebates and how it might drive your pricing on 340B, but it's also going to drive understanding how that's going to impact my operations, and do I have the capability to even determine what best price is and understand what that stacking is. 340B program, as I said, a lot of the Medicaid has an effect on the 340B, but it continues to grow and it becomes a big player in the marketplace. So I'd like to take this time to thank you for this. Talk soon.
Hi, thank you so much, Tim and Jeff. I'm very excited to present today about medical affairs in the coming years. My name is Grace Macalino. I'm an epidemiologist by training, and I'm a director in our life sciences practice, focusing on medical affairs and scientific strategy. It's really important to really start and focus in on the unique and complex role of medical affairs. Medical affairs really represents the medical voice of patients, has scientific ownership, and really represents the voice of the patient and patient's interests within a life sciences for-profit organization. One of the important trends that we're finding is really identifying opportunities to align the commitment of medical affairs within the broader brand plan. On this slide, you see a lot of information that I'd like to kind of go over, right? Medical affairs owns advancing the scientific and medical knowledge of the company products, very research motivated, and the activities are really meant to be non-promotional. Medical affairs are able to have off-label conversations and really represents the credibility arm of a company. On the other side, we have our commercial participants or colleagues, right, that are focused on marketing and selling company products, driving product demand and preference, and are really seen to be promotional. Where and how these shared responsibilities really need to be coordinated together relates to compliance, patient centricity, and account management. As we see that some companies are really looking to coordinate efforts as it relates to account management, the need to really be able to do this in a thoughtful, transparent way is super valuable. And making sure that both the client's needs are met, but then in a compliant way, the focus is still on the patient, medical is able to do medical functions, and commercial is able to do commercial functions. And where and how these coordinated efforts are conducted, we're really seeing is the evolution of what medical affairs looks like in 2024 and beyond, and where it can be seen as a strategic partner in life sciences senior leadership. So another thing I'd like to review are disease and patient population trends that we're seeing. In post-COVID, we're really seeing a lot of growing misinformation, unfortunately, as well as mistrust in not just the life sciences industry, but also in healthcare broadly. It really is important for medical affairs groups to really understand that these issues are evolving and where and how to best address this. Since medical affairs is firmly located in terms of putting out great, rigorous information out there for patients, really understanding and getting to the source of that misinformation and mistrust, and speaking to that, and being really able to speak to the voice of patients, that where and how they most need it is going to be super valuable. You know, the field is continued to evolve and focus on rare diseases, and where and how to access these hard to reach populations is super important from a medical affairs standpoint. Also understanding small number issues as it relates to study design and understanding how to design studies for these types of settings, analysis issues, really lie firmly within medical affairs. There is a phenomenon also that's happening, folks are expecting to happen in 2024, is this historic reversal, where the proportion of folks over the age of 65 and 65 is actually going to be higher than the proportion of folks that are younger 15. And this is a huge transition for the United States that we're both, and that has been seen in a couple of other countries in Europe. And we're seeing is happening more and more up till 2030, where they say 25% of the countries in the world are going to have this historic reversal. Now, this really speaks a lot to the aging population that we're seeing here in the United States and broadly across the world. And the impact on medical affairs is really going to be, how can we be thoughtful to be responsive to these changing demographics, to be able to speak to the aging and the needs as well as trends that are going on, and making sure that we're sensitive to this aging population and how to best align to those issues that are going to be required for them. As based on all those things that we just mentioned, right? Medical affairs really does play a critical role in quantifying the value of a therapy, right? You have limited funding, demands evolving over time. So really understanding what are the unique needs of patients, providers, payers. They're going to need different kinds of focus on the evidence that's out there to really hone in on what messaging makes the biggest difference for those communities, right? For patients, with the goal of defining the right treatment to the right patient at the right time, really understanding what are the treatment pathways, sort of how does a patient first actually get to treatment so that you can be most responsive and really speak to what their needs are in those moments. As far as a provider, what knowledge is required around the disease state awareness? What are the mechanisms of action that would be valuable for a provider to understand so that they can really make informed decisions as it relates to a brand or a product? And then from a payer standpoint, really, what are the important clinical benefit and outcomes? And, how do we describe clinical utility as well as cost effectiveness in a way that really translates to both the payer's needs as well as ultimately what the patients need to get access to important drugs as well as medical devices. As far as data and technology trends, lots and lots of, exciting news on the artificial intelligence front. However, it's really important to be thoughtful in the medical affairs space, where and how these artificial intelligence provide value. There's still a long road before us to understand, where and how it's helpful and where and how it does not take the place of really thoughtful scientific insight as well as scientific exchange. As far as data availability, you hear more and more real-world evidence being available out in the world. However, accessing those data, we're still kind of at the beginning in terms of what it looks like to be able to access data at different hospitals, and navigating those waters are still at the very beginning in 2024 for sure. Medical affairs being firmly placed as the air traffic control person as it relates to health economics and outcomes research, really integrating and bringing in those conversations across an integrated evidence generation strategy is going to be super important in the coming years. And finally, it's really important as I bring into all this together that we remember that all of these initiatives, all of these changing trends are really meant to make sure that the patient voice is at the center of everything that we do within medical affairs and really drives the science as well as access to patients in the way that they need it most. So thank you so much for your time. Really looking forward to connecting in the future. And I look forward to hearing more from Arun and Mario about global perspectives as it relates to life sciences organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace, for this insightful introduction to trends in medical affairs for 2024. We'll now switch gears to talk more broadly about global trends in our industry. I'm Mario Prohaska. I'm a director with our Life Sciences Advisory Practice, and I'm joined for this exciting conversation around opportunities and challenges for our global industry in 2024 by my colleague Arun Parakat. And as we get started, I'll let Arun introduce himself as well.
Thank you, Mario. So my name is Arun Parakat. I look after Baker Tilly's life sciences practice outside the US. It's quite timely that we get to speak early in the year and also reflect on the year gone by. We're already seeing some of the headwinds in this year form up. So I'm really looking forward to our discussion, Mario, today.
Thank you. Let's dive right into it. So I think maybe Arun, I'll quickly turn it back to you, if you don't mind, just to set the stage as far as some of the trends, the key trends that we're seeing affecting our industry in 2024.
So it's such an interesting period that we are in. On one hand, we are seeing that there is quite a bit of uncertainty in the market. Inflation remains quite high. Problems around supply chain still remains priority for many companies. Meanwhile, elections are up in countries around Europe, but also in US, of course, also in Asia. And there will be renewed interest on medicines policy. And regulators will start looking at how do we build upon some of the lessons that we learned from the pandemic, and we're still learning from the pandemic. For example, there will be further push amongst policymakers to focus on equity of access to medicines. And this is where the $3.4 billion investment to vaccines and vital medicines in UAE will come into picture. Also, better funding models to improve access to highly effective and curative personalized therapies will come into focus. We're already seeing a considerable interest in that area, especially around social impact bonds, for example, in France. On the other hand, there will be brand new challenges. And those challenges, for example, in 2023, we saw generative AI and large language models showing a rapidity of adoption of over 100 million users in just two months that we've not seen any time in human history following the launch of ChatGPT-3. So there is huge amount of ability of AI to transform productivity in our industry, from target discovery to detailing prescribers. But there are still questions around the potential risk of AI and human values and rights and impacts around it by AI. So we can think of 2024 as a year where life sciences companies still look to grapple with and de-risk their pipeline and implement more calculated risk-benefit approaches to unlock the potential from gene-edited curated therapies, but also productivity gains from AI. So Mario, bringing it back to yourselves, in terms of these changes that you see in the market coming up, is there a way by which we can is there a framework by which we can kind of look at it and manage it?
Yeah, I think that's a great question and a segue to the next slide in our materials. I think if we talk about kind of managing change and managing risk by extension, I think what we're seeing is a move towards a much more kind of holistic framing of risk across multiple risk domains that we see here. Previously, what we had is a situation where oftentimes certain types of risk management or domains such as compliance or financial controls were fairly siloed, but I think we're moving in a direction where that's changing to a much more holistic approach to risk management as a whole, and that's driven by internal changes, but also external changes as well. And I will just note some of the key regulatory changes that are driving that. So the EU CSRD Act that is coming into force, the EU AI Act. So these are fairly global types of regulations that are driving change in our industry in terms of risk management. But also in 2024, we'll see some notable local changes as well, such as the anticipated changes to the UK ABPI PMCPA code that will be rolled out next year. So in summary, risk management is becoming more holistic, more integrated, and I think we'll continue to see that in 2024. And I wonder how, if we take that kind of thought process forward, how, from your perspective, that applies to a particular type of risk, in this case, the risk around generating appropriate evidence needed for scientific and commercial success of our organizations. And maybe we can move to the next slide as we move forward with this part of the conversation.
Sure. Thanks, Mario. The risk of availability of evidence is super important, especially for market access and commercialization of products. We saw during the pandemic that type of evidence generation stand in good stead, especially when we sought to understand disease and new therapies and such. The effectiveness of mRNA vaccines is testament to that very fact. We saw we were able to analyze EHR records and vaccination data, and we were able to see a benefit from the mRNA vaccines in less than a year by being able to launch these medicines globally. So RWA is increasingly becoming important to de-risk the lack of quality evidence. To do this and use it, study designs also need to keep pace, and there are advances in that area too. External comparator arms, synthetic controls, for example, being used alongside RCTs data is going to gain more acceptance. There is also improvement in terms of access to RWA data, such as from Darwin, from Eden program, as well as from HDR UK. So all in all, evidence advances are going to be seen in 2024 and over the years too. But one more area of risk that I want to kind of probe a little bit, Mario, is ESG, and it's being talked of quite a bit. How do you see ESG risk being managed?
I think it will certainly be kind of top of mind for a lot of our clients in 2024. And I think the primary way in which companies will manage that is firstly by seeking to establish appropriate governance around their ESG programs, which I think will be a focus area in 2024. And this involves obviously robust cross-functional collaboration, which has sometimes been a challenge for our industry, but also critically, I think, applying some of the key lessons of other government reporting programs, such as transparency reporting, from a historical point of view as well, where the focus really upfront should be, from a governance perspective, on establishing the processes, establish kind of the cross-functional collaboration and buy-in, and then moving towards automation and kind of focusing on the mechanics of executing effective ESG programs. So learning the lessons of things like transparency and establishing strong governance around ESG in 2024 will be key for our industry in terms of risk mitigation. And maybe as we close, I did want to bring this back to you to a topic that I know you're quite interested in, namely AI and the impact of AI more broadly across our industry.
Thanks, Mario. So AI risk has become quite a bit important for us over the year. It's become front and center with a rapidity that has surprised us all. We've seen that. There are many threats to this risk, but in essence, I think the key area of focus currently is how do we make sure that the AI that we use in healthcare does not do patients harm. So the EU AI Act in that is an advance in that area. It came in 2023. We'll see its rollout in 2024. It puts quite a bit of requirements to high-risk AI providers in terms of how they go about regulating and making sure that it is de-risked. It is very similar to how we use evidence in life sciences. That's the first thing to talk of. But the second thing I would also bring out as a point is that there is quite a bite in any infringements of this AI Act, to the tune of about 2 to 6% of global turnover can be a penalty for many companies who infringe on this in this act. Does that mean that EU lack out on some of the innovation upside and productivity gains that AI could bring in when companies are shy to bring such high-risk AI into healthcare products? It's to be seen. So overall, a really exciting year to look forward to, and also look forward to helping manage some of the risks in access, compliance, and AI for our life sciences customers. So thank you.
Okay, next up on the agenda, we're going to go through the compliance landscape for the life sciences industry. I am Mark Scallon. I'm a principal here at Baker Tilly, and I lead the compliance and ethics service offerings for the life sciences industry at the firm.
And I'm Sam Sutherland. I'm a director on Mark's compliance and ethics team here at Baker Tilly.
And what we both wanted to walk you through today, again, are some of the things that we can expect to see in 2024 with regards to compliance for the life sciences industry. As in previous years, I think we saw a lot happen in 2023 that is going to have an impact on the focus areas of compliance professionals in the life sciences industry in 2024. Plus, we're also seeing some things that will be coming up in 2024 that you can expect to hear about that will dictate, again, some action items you're going to need to take in 2024 and going forward. So we have a lot that has gone on in 2023, but we have really bucketed everything that has gone on and what we can expect in 2024 into 6 main buckets. So if you'd like to go to the next slide, thank you. That will show you what those 6 are. So what we really have are supplemental compliance program guidance provided by enforcement agencies. So there've been a number of agencies that came out with some guidance in 2023 that is going to dictate what occurs in 2024. Also, what we're seeing increased use of CMS open payments data to identify compliance issues is another topic. The third is related to the Inflation Reduction Act and its effects on product pricing and compliance with that. Fourthly, the use of technology and compliance considerations related to artificial intelligence, compliance considerations related to the global stage, and then lastly, it wouldn't be reflecting on 2023 and predicting 2024 without mentioning the emergence of these new weight loss products that have hit the market and everyone has been talking about. So those are the 6 things we want to walk you through today. The first thing I'm going to walk you through is the supplemental guidance program provided by enforcement agencies. And so we've really seen 4 main items in 2023 that's going to require us to take some action in 2024. The first one is around the OIG General Compliance Program guidance. This was sort of a long-awaited clarification from the OIG that the industry was waiting for. It is not life sciences specific yet. We can expect that in 2024. But on November 6th of 2023, the OIG did offer some updated guidance on the expectations they have for a comprehensive compliance program. So they made some clarifications on a few points related to compliance leadership, enforcement, training, risk assessments, auditing and monitoring, a lot of the same things that we may have heard in the past, but sort of doubled down on a few items, like, for example, with compliance leadership, really saying that there should be no reporting from compliance and compliance executives to the legal or financial functions, and that it really needs to be direct reporting to the CEO and or the board of directors. Again, we've heard that before in the past, but now they're really kind of doubling down on that message. In addition, we also got some updates from the Department of Justice and on their evaluation of corporate compliance programs. And in March 3rd of 2023, the DOJ did revise its evaluation of corporate compliance program guidelines, and really including new recommendations around the use of personal devices and other communication platforms and messaging applications between a life sciences company and members of the healthcare community. It also did provide some clarification around the use of compensation packages and how that can be used to drive compliance, and that is now something they're going to be looking for when they may be evaluating a company's corporate compliance program. The third is on FDA communications from firms to healthcare providers regarding scientific information on unapproved uses of approved or cleared medical products. So for those of us who have thought that with the emergence of the First Amendment argument with regards to off-label marketing was sort of de-emphasizing the risk associated with off-label marketing, FDA coming out with this communication sort of sends a clear message that no, that is still something that everyone must be compliant with, and that people in 2024 we're expecting will sort of again start taking a closer look on some of the activities where there's a lot of off-label marketing risk associated with it. And then lastly, the California Climate Corporate Data Accountability Act. So this is something that came up late in 2023, in October of 2023, where California passed 2 pieces of landmark legislation related to the reporting of corporate climate related financial risks, and really requiring companies, if they want to do business in the state of California, to abide by the reporting of climate related compliance. This goes into effect in 2026 for activities that occurs in 2025. Therefore, we think 2024 is when companies are going to start really preparing for this California legislation, because the fines associated with noncompliance are upwards of $500,000 a year of noncompliance. So those are the 4 primary areas around additional guidance from 2023 that we think is going to have an impact on 2024. I'm now going to turn it over to Sam, who's going to talk more about expected CMS actions in 2024. Go ahead, Sam.
Great, thanks, Mark. So the next thing we want to highlight that we did see in 2023 and expect more in 2024 is CMS's use of open payments data. So for this, topic specifically, we are talking about federal spend transparency laws at that federal level that in the US, and the reporting is that really fun March 31st deadline every year. In 2010, just level setting, although I'm sure a lot of folks here on the line are well aware, the Federal Sunshine Act was enacted. And we always expected that CMS would eventually start using the data that's being submitted to identify potential compliance issues with either the reporting itself or also, kind of funky things to look into specific to manufacturers, certain HCPs, et cetera. We do know that recently a number of manufacturers have received letters from the Open Payments Compliance Team at CMS. And specifically, this has been related to timely attestation and the number of records that are submitted as new records after the March 31st deadline during the resubmission period. This did, go back further than the last submission period. So CMS is looking retroactively at data that's submitted prior to the most recent reporting period. And we do expect CMS to continue to use data analytics to identify potential items for enforcement action moving into 2024 and beyond. So really important to keep in mind that they are, it appears, taking action on the data that's being submitted. And, we expect that to increase as we move forward in the future. Mark, I'll turn it back to you to talk about the IRA.
Great. And we would also be remiss to talk about what occurred in 2023 and how it will have an impact on 2024 if we didn't mention the Inflation Reduction Act and its effects on pricing. So as most of you are aware, in 2023, as part of the Inflation Reduction Act, companies who manufactured the 10 most expensive products as identified by the government were essentially required to negotiate prices for those products with the government, and then attest to the fact that whatever price was quote unquote negotiated would be considered a fair price through fair negotiation practices. That has been debated throughout the year as to the fairness of that, as well as to the constitutionality of a lot of this. But what has occurred in 2023 and has resulted in a number of lawsuits from some of the manufacturers of these products against the government is only going to expand. It will expand from 10 to 25 in the near future, and continue to expand thereafter. And so this is something that is going to continue to evolve and is going to have a huge impact on pricing strategies of companies, which really requires companies in 2024 to really start taking a look at some scenarios related to if their product is to be selected. What do they expect the negotiated price to end up being? How will that impact the business? And what action can we take today to sort of prepare for that? So I think that we're definitely going to see a lot of attention and even more noise in 2024 than we heard about in 2023 related to this. Sam, I'll turn it back over to you to talk about AI and technology considerations in 2024.
Thanks, Mark. So, of course, AI and technology, the beast that is going nowhere. We do expect to see continued emergence of data-driven compliance programs in 2024, and heavy reliance on visualization tools like dashboards to manage the compliance function of a global life sciences company. With this type of visualization and data-driven monitoring, we do expect to see a heightened focus on auditing and monitoring activities especially for commercial organizations. Once you have all that really, really good, valuable data that is, pertaining to the management of the compliance program as a whole, you need to take some action on it and make sure that you're using that data in the right way, and identifying and all of those potential compliance issues, which is where auditing and monitoring really takes the main stage and should be a large focus moving forward. We do expect communication monitoring of employees to see an increase, not only the increase in virtual interactions that was a result of COVID and has only kind of increased from there. The communications between employees and life sciences professionals and then members of the healthcare community have only increased. And we know that a lot of those communications are happening on personal cell phones or through other means that the company, may not have an ability to be able to monitor or audit. What's really important there, as Mark discussed previously in the presentation, the DOJ has issued updated guidance that touches on appropriate monitoring and the structure of virtual communications between your employees and members of the healthcare community. So please make sure you check that out. But, keep in mind these types of virtual interactions and communications are a focus area of the DOJ and other regulatory enforcement agencies here in the US and abroad. In terms of communication monitoring, it's kind of a nice segue into the discussion of AI, because there are actual really great monitoring tools that employ AI. And this does appear to be, a very great detailed, comprehensive way of monitoring these types of communications, considering the volume of them. And if you are going to employ something utilizing AI, like a communication monitoring tool, we do just like to highlight AI is in its very early stages, and you need to make sure that all of the governance elements that you usually think about, processes, policies, procedures, people management, the organizational structure, all of that needs to be built out before employing the technology. So something really important to keep in mind, we do see the use of AI increasing in 2024 and beyond, as well as the use of technology to support your global healthcare compliance program. The next thing we're going to talk about is compliance considerations related to the global stage. I know earlier in the presentation, Arun and Mario discussed the global considerations in general, but now we're really going to hone in on compliance program developments that occurred in 2023 that we do anticipate seeing traction or an impact in 2024. In October of 2023 in the United Kingdom, the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act received royal assent, essentially introducing it into law. Part of that act was the failure to prevent fraud offense. And this failure to prevent fraud offense is triggered based on a number of different criteria, but really aimed at large organizations. There's specific criteria related to the number of employees you have, the amount of turnover in assets in pounds, and several other pieces of qualifying criteria. So just make sure to check that out and see if your organization is required under this law to meet the requirements. If it is an offense that's triggered, it is if an individual associated with the organization in whatever capacity, whether they're an agent acting on your behalf, an employee, a contractor, etc., if they commit fraud intending to benefit the company, then the offense is triggered. They will do an investigation, and then the company would be found liable if they cannot demonstrate that at the time of the offense, there were reasonable prevention procedures established. The other important thing to note here is that in the law, there is a fine of an unlimited amount that may be imposed. So very serious implications if you are found to be in offense of this failure to prevent fraud offense. But however, the United Kingdom government has not yet defined what reasonable prevention procedures mean. So until that is defined, the law is not enforceable. So we do expect in 2024 for the UK government to define that term, and then for this law in effect to be enforceable. Additionally, in 2024, we expect the Italian Sunshine Act, which entered into force in June of 2022, to be fully implemented. So the Ministry of Health in Italy has not yet had the framework from a technical perspective established in the form of a data portal to actually receive the reports from manufacturers. So right now, the reporting is actually, not required or not possible, and so the law is not enforceable. But in August of 2023, the Ministry of Health did publish a draft decree with related technical information and opened a public consultation period that ran through September of 2023 to collect any comments from manufacturers related to the technical setup of receiving spend transparency reporting in Italy. We do expect the Ministry of Health to utilize the information and the comments and responses that they collected in order to fully implement the technical infrastructure to receive these open payments reporting, and for that to be fully enforceable in 2024. The last thing we'll touch on is that in 2023, the Prescription Medicines Code of Practice Authority, which is essentially the governing body that oversees the application and any updates to the ABPI code in the UK, they did announce that there would be updates coming in 2024. They did not indicate exactly what those updates would be, but the PMB-CPA did announce and launch a public consultation period on their proposed updates that is running through February 29th of 2024. We do expect, just like Italy, those comments and responses to be collected and then utilized in any ABPI codes that are updated in 2024, which we do expect in the first half of the year. Mark, I'll turn it back over to you to discuss the emergence of new weight loss products.
Great, thanks, Sam. And really, if we were to characterize 2023 as the year of, one could argue it was the year of the IRA, or one could argue, and I would probably agree, that it was the year of the emergence of these new weight loss drugs. So as I'm sure a lot of you have known through a lot of the advertisements that are the direct-to-consumer advertisements that you see on the television, but two GLP-1 agonist products, namely Ozempic and Mounjaro, which have traditionally been used or prescribed for type 2 diabetes, were found that at a much larger dose increase the amount of weight loss advantages that came along with it, plus other possible health advantages related to the liver and cardiovascular disease and things like that. A lot of people in 2023 have been saying that these are real game changers, that this is going to change, possibly change healthcare going forward. The cascading effects of these products resulting in significant weight loss in a large population of the world will have, again, that cascading effect on other the need for patients to be using other products as well related to those other health issues like cardiovascular disease and kidney disease and things like that. And the market agrees. The market value of these products is now valued at about anywhere from $78 to $100 billion, which is really owned by, at the moment, two companies. And with the opportunities for money that we're talking about here, usually there comes along with it compliance issues. People will chase the money, and organizations, both legitimate and illegitimate, will chase the money. And so what we're expecting in 2024 is that we're going to start seeing this emergence of potential compliance issues related to things like the emergence of fraudulent products that are touting themselves as being Ozempic or like Ozempic or Wegovy or Zepbound, Wegovy and Zepbound being the weight loss branded products of those two GLP-1 agonist products. And so we've already started to see over the last few weeks the emergence or confiscation of counterfeit products related to these weight loss drugs. I think we're going to see more of that in 2024. I think we're also going to see some product diversion and additional scrutiny related to off-label marketing of these products. As I said, there are potential benefits for other diseases that these products can give that have not necessarily been approved by FDA yet. But I think we're going to start seeing companies touting the off-label benefits of them. There's also the potential for misinformation and also questionable sales and marketing practices related to these products. And this is all just, I mean, I think in 2023, the emergence of these products, not just as type 2 diabetic products, but as weight loss products, has really come quickly. And I think 2024, we're going to be seeing a lot of things coming up as a result of that. So more to come and on that and the rest of the issues that Sam and I talked to you about just now. So we're looking forward to this 2024 to be an exciting year. And we'll, of course, be monitoring things that occurs throughout the year so that when we look at 2025, we'll be providing you with relevant updates to what to expect in that year. But in the meantime, thank you for your attention. Thank you for joining. I'm now going to turn it over to Darren Jones, who's going to share some closing remarks with you. Thanks so much.
Mark, Sam, thank you very much for that. That brings us to the conclusion of the program. Appreciate everybody, kind of staying with us here. That was a lot of content. Again, questions, please go ahead and submit questions. We do have a couple of minutes left over for questions. You can submit them. In case we don't have time to get to all the questions, please do include your name with your question, and we will absolutely make sure to follow up with you. A couple closing remarks, I guess, from my point of view. I always view these events as a call to action for us in the industry. Right? Let's monitor the impact of the IRA. Let's look at how we empower, medical affairs more broadly and stakeholder management and evidence and generation strategy. How do we prepare for more global anti-corruption and transparency, emphasis, especially in a period of political instability, as we're probably going to face here over the next year or so. And finally, how do we continue to strike this balance between scientific evidence and what's promotion? These are all, I think, complicated questions that need to be addressed. But I think, if I could, for those of us who are NFL fans, if I could quote my favorite NFL coach, Mike Tomlin, we just need to do the routine things routinely. I think that's so important for us in this industry. There's a lot of routine things that we just need to be able to knock out because there are a lot of high risk, high impact areas that I feel like sometimes we just don't have the time or the ability to spend the attention that we need to on some of these thornier issues. But the more we can keep those routine things routine, allows us to free up our mental capacity to focus on a lot of the issues like we heard about in today's session. And with that, let's go ahead and pivot over to the questions.